All right, so in yesterday's video, I was elaborating on what the SI fantasy was, the core fundamental fantasy of the SI dominant. Also present in all SI users, but not as a core sort of hinge of the entire psychic system, particularly the unconscious patterning of system. In yesterday's video, I was arguing that the fundamental fantasy of SI could be called a fantasy of identification, of primitive identification with the idealized object, which is actually in later life more so experienced as identification with the world. Because the world of experience becomes, if you like, what comes to supplant or replace the idealized womb and then the idealized breast. We've seen this in the case of NI. NI is seeking to repair the world, find its salvation through the repair of the world, not just in other people, but the world as a whole, in the real sort of unalloyed NI visions. In the case of SI, there is a gradual replacement of the breast, later with mother figures and everything, and father figures, with the world as such. This is part of psychological development, psychological maturing, cognitive maturing, ability of accessing more abstract concepts and logical mathematical deduction, and a lot of cognitive enhancements that happen in the development of the child. It's not just a matter of psychodynamics, it's also cognitive, and these two spheres interact in complex ways. Now, SI doesn't seem to have this strong drive to repair the world. However, it has a drive, it seems to me, to find itself at home in the world, to find itself in fantasy identified with the world. I think in terms of character, if we're not trying to link SI fantasy with SI character, the kind of soft conservatism that we find in a lot of SI dominant types, right, can be explained in this way. Because if the SI dominant is in fantasy identified with the world, a world which is itself seen as idealized, well, it becomes very dangerous to interfere with the world, to change the world forcefully. That can be done by NI dominance. It can be done by judging dominance to have a strong a strong NI fantasy, right? INFJs, ENTJs, INTJs also. These can be revolutionaries, these can be radicals in relation to the world. Because you're like, okay, something needs to be repaired. Maybe we need to do something big in order to repair it, a revolution, whatever it might be. In the case of SI, it's like, whoa, wait a second. I'm identified with this world idealized in my fantasy. If you try to forcefully intervene, you can only make it worse. And that's, if you like, explains the root of a typical form of SI reasoning, which is to say, and that's conservatism in a nutshell, this world might not be perfect, but it's already working quite well. Let's keep the best and not change it, because we are all too prone to forget what's good when we try to revolutionize things, because when we try to relate to the world through the lens of revolution or radical transformation, we might actually not realize we're going to lose a lot of what was good about the world. Now, this is typical conservatism. This is typical, I would argue, SI conservatism. What's happening much deeper in unconscious fantasy is this idea that the self is secure insofar as it is identified with the world. Again, the world seen as idealized. That's the original source of the identification. It's certainly not felt in the adult. The identification takes place as unconscious, and the fact that originally there was an idealization of the breast going on, and the breast's riches, the breast's goodness, in order to deal with envy, well, that's just not at all present to the mind of the SI dominant, any more that the sort of cycle of destruction and repair is present to the mind of the NI dominant or the strong NI user. Of course, it's not. But I think that's what explains it. It also explains something else, right? which is that when you have types that are not SI dominant but have SI somewhere, there's often a sense in these types, and some members in my community, I want to acknowledge their input there, because this was part of our discussions, you know, on Discord. By the way, if you want to join my Discord, you have to become a patron. If you become a patron, you help me massively. The first link below is to my Patreon page. So let me just mention that this work I'm doing here, I think it's important. Maybe you think it's important. I won't be able to continue doing it without support. So please, it's only a few euros or dollars a month, or a few euros or dollars a year. You also get access to lots of cool perks, like a whole library of deep dives when I go in detail about topics. Like one that I did recently was on the concept of transitional area, super important concept psychologically for all types. I did one on NI dystopia. I did one on NI and magic and mysticism. So lots of long format videos, exclusive for patrons, rich library of them already. Access them if you become a patron, and access to Discord to interact with me and the others on a daily basis, either to just hang out, relate, but also to be part of this collaborative project together. So some members of my Discord community mentioned this because they are SI users themselves, and they have a keen understanding of how their SI functions. And they did mention both that there is this sense of going through a particular journey with trials and tribulations. Maybe you could call it the hero's journey, because that was vividly described by one of the members. But there is this sense you can always go back. It's almost like after a hard day or a hard month or a hard year, you return somewhere. You become enfolded in this area, in this kind of inner sanctum where you can rest, recuperate, replenish your resources, perhaps even be enhanced after all the experience that you've gathered. This almost gives it a kind of RPG sort of framework. This is the same principle, except that it's not the whole world that is identified with in this case. There is still an ideal world that is identified with, but it's more localized, can always be accessed. So the sense of the original primitive projective identification is still at play. It's just not manifested through the same projection of a fundamental fantasy, but rather an auxiliary fantasy in the case of these SI users. So hopefully that makes sense. This is something that I really wanted to mention. Also, there's things that could be said in terms of what I called the NI unconscious as a painting, whereas the SI unconscious is a map. There's something more dynamic about the NI unconscious because you need to dynamically repair, whereas when we're talking about a process of identifying with, it can be quote unquote a bit more static. It's not completely static, of course, things are more complicated, but repair is more dynamic than identification. And here you can also understand why the NI world is more imagistic and impressionistic, whereas the SI world is more realistic, or in a classical sense, right? If we were to use the painting metaphor. So hopefully that was useful, guys. Let me know your comments in the comment section. I look forward to discussing that with you. Give me a like, because I also need these likes. It costs you nothing, it's instantaneous, but it really helps with the referencing of my videos, so I'd be very grateful for that. Don't forget about my 2 books about the INFJ personality, waiting for the NI book that's upcoming, and I will be talking about a lot of functions in there. So it's going to be more than just an NI book, but I can't wait to share more about the book with you. In fact, on our Discord server, we discuss the book, and I even give them some excerpts. It's like a mini third perk of being a Patreon supporter, so thank you for that. Don't forget then about the Ecstatic Soul, which is my first book on the INFJ, and looked at the INFJ as a mind, consciousness, and thinking. You need to read this book if you want a deeper understanding of the INFJ personality. Great introduction to this book, which is the INFJ in the modern world, how to be happy, how to lead a rich, fruitful, and purposeful life as an INFJ in a world that, let's be honest, we often consider hostile. These 2 books go well together, of course, as you can see, and they're essential reading for a deep depth psychological understanding of the INFJ personality. So I thank you very much for this. All the links are below, and I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Bye-bye.